Welcome to immigrationquestion.com, your go-to resource for U.S. immigration insights. We provide clear immigration news and information. Our platform provides a network of licensed attorneys who can answer your questions and guide you through the process. From visas to green cards, asylums to citizenships, immigrationquestion.com helps you to network with immigration attorneys so that you can move forward with confidence. Sign up today or download the app. Free registration, limited time offer. Stay tuned. We go live in 30 seconds.
Hello everyone and welcome to this special edition webinar hosted by immigrationquestion.com, a networking platform and meeting ground where immigrants, families, advocates and licensed immigration attorneys come together to understand US immigration policies and procedures better. I'm GB Satusa and I'll be your host for today's important discussion: why PERM audits happen and what you can do to avoid them. Now, employers seeking to sponsor foreign workers for employment-based green cards must obtain a PERM labor certification. However, the process is one of the most detailed and heavily scrutinized stages of the immigration journey. When a PERM application is selected for audit, it can significantly increase processing times and create additional compliance obligations for both employers and employees. Now, understanding why audits happen, what documentation is required, and how employers can proactively prepare may help reduce the delays and avoid unnecessary complications during the PERM process. To help us break this down, we're honored to be joined by Giacomazzi, Esquire, an experienced immigration attorney who advises employers and professionals on employment-based immigration matters, including PERM labor certification filings and audit responses. Attorney Giacomazzi, thank you for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you for this important discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Now, before we begin, a quick reminder to the audience: immigrationquestion.com is an educational and networking platform. The information shared today is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute individualized legal advice. If you are joining us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, or any other platform, welcome. Do share this session with anyone who may benefit from understanding PERM audits and compliance issues. And of course, please subscribe. All right, let's dive right in, attorney. Can you please explain what a PERM audit is and its importance?
Sure, happy to do so. So the first thing I want to explain is that receiving a PERM audit is a normal part of the process. So if you do receive an audit, don't panic. It's a routine part of the process. And it does not mean that you've done or the attorney has done anything wrong. What an audit does, or now a request for information, or RFI, is it's asking for information. It wants you to prove the information that you've put in your PERM application, or what we call the ETA 9089.
Okay.
And why does this come about? Because the PERM labor certification is actually a unique type of filing. When you file other types of immigration petitions, a family petition to sponsor a family member, or an application to get a green card, almost every other type of immigration filing that there is, when you file that document, you also include supporting documents that will prove the things that you say. So if you say, okay, this person's birthday is on this day and the passport number is on this day, well, you will also include a picture of the passport to show that those things are true. But the PERM application is different. We don't include supporting documents with the PERM. So instead, the proof behind the PERM is the signature. So the employer, the attorney, they are attesting that everything that they've put in that PERM application is true and accurate. It's at its core, it's like an honor system filing. So in order to ensure that this honors system is working, the Department of Labor will do spot checks on PERM filings and PERM applications to say, hey, you've said that you put it newspaper articles on this day and this day in the New York Times. Can you provide us the proof that you've done so? Please share your recruitment efforts. You said that no one was qualified. We'd like to see, the evidence of that. Or you say that the person that you're sponsoring has a BA from New York University. Can you show us proof that that person does have the education that you said? So it is just a check based on, basically saying, prove the information that you've put in this application, prove what you've claimed. And that happens, it used to be roughly 30% of all PERM applications were selected for audit just to provide this information only.
Now, are PERM audits always targeted, or can they be random as well?
So that's what I'm saying, is that under this situation, there are going to be a certain number of audits that are totally random, that are just spot checking, and to say, okay, please prove the information that you've put in. Yeah. Having said that, there are some audits that are targeted. And what we mean by that is there are certain questions in your PERM application that if you answer yes to those questions, we refer to those as automatic audit triggers. So there's certain pieces of information that the Department of Labor is looking for, that if you include that in your petition, then that will automatically make them look closer. In the old system, when we were doing PERMs a couple of years ago, that would be, we called it an automatic audit trigger, because if you said yes to any one of these things, then you would automatically get an audit. But luckily, the system changed a couple of years ago, where in the PERM application, now that it's moved over to the flag system, if you say yes to any of those automatic audit trigger questions, now you have the ability to provide information in a box that opens up. And here is our opportunity nowadays to avoid the full-blown audit or the request for information within this system afterwards, because what they are giving you in this box to respond to the automatic audit trigger is the ability to satisfy their questions on the PERM application itself. So this is kind of a new, within the last couple of years, system. And it's really sort of changed the way that we do PERMs, right? Because you can anticipate what the issues might be. And if you can treat each of these explanation boxes as if they were a mini audit response within the application itself, then you may be able to avoid a request for information or an audit going forward. And once, it might be approved on the initial review because you've already responded and anticipated and responded to the audit on the application itself.
All right. Now, in 2026, are employers being held to a higher documentation and compliance standard than before?
Well, I mean, there are, PERM has always been a very difficult area to practice in. It is very unforgiving. And in that regard, one wrong response, one piece of information that's in the wrong box, if you put in FA 14 instead of FA 13, if you haven't responded or put the correct information in the correct box, the U.S. Department of Labor has always considered that the appropriate remedy is just to refile. So that's a very difficult situation, because refiling can take up to 2 years. It sets you back, not months, not days, not weeks, but literal years. We're seeing the PERM process take up to 24 plus months at the moment. So is it difficult? Yes. Are the compliance standards high? Yes. But are they higher now than they have been? I mean, sure. In this day and age of immigration, United States immigration practice, everything is more difficult since, the last 18 months of, the current administration. But having said that, at least in the PERM situation, in the last couple of years, for the new PERM practitioners out there, we now have the ability in terms of PERM audits to address potential audit triggers within the application itself, so that in fact the PERM may be approved without the audit, which would add an additional 1 year of processing to the application. So that's really, I mean, if you find it helpful, I could go through some of those, automatic audit triggers that might come up, and then give some maybe helpful hints on those.
You can, Tony.
So, okay, what are the automatic audit triggers? One of them is, for example, the foreign language requirement. So if you have a job that is an IT job, for example, okay, and there's a question, does this require foreign language? And if so, what is the language? Okay, and by foreign language, we mean any language that's other than English. If this is a job where, it's for a Spanish teacher, okay, then obviously you need a foreign language requirement of Spanish is part of the job and part of the job duties of the job. However, if the job is something like an IT manager and it's asking, do you need a foreign language requirement? And you say, yes, Korean. Well, that might trigger the U.S. Department of Labor to think, well, you're actually tailoring the requirements of this job specific to your beneficiary, and you're excluding potential U.S. applicants. And so then you need to provide a business necessity of why you have this foreign language requirement. And there are legitimate business necessity requirements. Perhaps the IT manager role that you are recruiting for and potentially hiring for manages a team of 16 software developers who are located in Seoul, South Korea. And the manager of that team, the software engineering manager of that team, needs to be able to oversee, the meetings, needs to be able to conduct the meetings and review the work, explain the work, and otherwise communicate with the team that he's managing in the Korean language. Well, now it totally makes sense that that there is a language requirement. And instead of needing to go through a whole audit or an RFI, if you can explain that information right in the audit itself, for example, I would put in an explanation, Korean language proficiency is required by business necessity. This position manages a development team of 15 engineers based in Seoul, South Korea. Daily duties include conducting meetings, planning, and code reviews in the Korean language. The Seoul team operates in Korean, and technical discussions require native fluency level of Korean language to ensure accuracy in software specifications and to prevent costly errors. This requirement reflects the employer's business operations, not an effort to restrict the labor market. Now, if you put in language like that in your in the box that it allows you to put, you avoid the audit or the RFI. So that's one trigger that will give you the opportunity to address it and to avoid it. Another one is, for example, a combination of occupations. So if you have a job that takes two jobs and puts it into one, then again, the Department of Labor will get suspicious that you're tailoring this job specific to the one person that you want to sponsor, the foreign beneficiary. So it might be a real world example of this might be that you want to hire someone who is both a marketing and data analytics manager. And these are two very separate things. You have a marketing manager and you have a data analytics manager. And sure, in big companies that have, marketing teams and data analytics teams separate and all of that, you would have one marketing manager and you would have one data analytics manager.
Yeah.
But if you were in a small 30-person startup business, it's very possible and probably the industry standard that in a smaller company, you would hire one person that wears both of those hats. Another example might be, if you had a small clinic or a small office, a small rural practice, and you would have like someone who did healthcare administration plus human resources types of duties. And again, you just explain you will need to have documentation, because if you in the explanation will say something like similar combination roles are common in startups of comparable size in the technology sector, and that might be true. But if you don't avoid the audit, and you will then be required to provide documentation to support that type of statement. And that's something that you'd want to prepare when you're preparing the PERM application itself.
All right.
Yeah, probably the biggest one, and I just want to touch on this, the biggest audit trigger would be if the job requirements exceed what is normal to the occupation.
Okay.
So, for example, if you have an occupation which is, a financial analyst, okay, or a cybersecurity, type of a person, any type of requirement, okay. And what you want to hire is the head of that department or a senior type of a person. Well, the Department of Labor has determined different types of job zones for each SOC code, let's say. So the Department of Labor will say, well, for an entry-level position of cybersecurity or for a financial analyst, the general recommended education that would be required for this type of job would be a bachelor's degree, and maybe up to 2 years of experience. But you don't want to hire just an entry-level position person. You want to hire the senior financial analyst. You want to hire someone that not only has a master's degree, but maybe 5 years of experience, or a master's degree plus 2 years, or something that's beyond what would basically be considered like the minimum education requirements, or outside of what the job zone generally would require. You have to document the business necessity. But in this case, you would do so to say, look, this is not just an entry-level position. This is a seniority type of position, and it does require skills that exceed just what would be required at the most basic entry-level position. And you document that, you explain that, and then again, if you can demonstrate that these types of qualifications for this type of role is common, or other in the industry, or that similar qualifications for equivalent roles are equivalent, then you state that. And this is where third-party websites such as like Indeed or salary.com or some of the others, you can go through there, or the website itself for whatever job that you are looking for. That state will have a job order that's published that's advertising the job opportunity, and you can look there and say, okay, what other similarly sized businesses are also looking for a senior financial advisor, and if so, what are their requirements? And then if you have some that are similar to what yours are, then you can show, yeah, I mean, it's a similar industry standard. So those are some of the ways to address audits, or to explain, to provide that information in the PERM itself to avoid the RFI.
All right. Now, attorney, if an employer receives an audit notice, what should their next step be?
I mean, the next step is to review it rather thoroughly. So there are some requests for information or audits that are just like your boilerplate, ones that you've got, a lot of times, especially the ones on the spot checks that are asking, the random audits that are asking for questions related to the recruitment, and the like. And because practitioners in this area have received very similar audits, perhaps tens, dozens, hundreds of times, sometimes you look at the audit and you say, oh, I know what this is. And then you provide the documents. But sometimes they might throw in an extra little question there. So you have to be very sure what you're answering and that you respond to every single question. When I prepare PERMs, I will anticipate all of the questions that are going to be asked, all the automatic audit triggers, and develop all of the evidence before I even start the entire process, the 9141, so that when and if an audit comes, the documentation is already prepared. The business necessity memo is already prepared. And so it's just a matter of reviewing what documents are requested and then putting together the response with the documentation, and the business necessity memo that we have already developed.
Yeah. Now, what types of documentation gaps or timing issues tend to create problems during the audit review?
Well, so for example, some, again, and this is a very unforgiving thing. I can give you some examples. So one problem could be that you have worked with a newspaper company to publish newspaper articles on consecutive Sunday publications. And they have sent you an email confirming that that they were published on May 10th and May 17th. And so you put that information in your PERM based on the email. But then when you get the audit and it asks you to prove that the two newspaper articles or advertisements were in fact published on those 2 days, and you go and you look at the publications, you notice that it wasn't the 10th and the 17th, it was the 3rd and the 10th instead. And the email was wrong, and the proof now is 2 different dates.
Yeah.
That in and of itself will cause a denial of your PERM, and you will have to start all over again. Similarly, you may, if you mention that someone has a bachelor's degree at a certain university, however, it's a foreign degree, and you have not done an equivalency evaluation of that educational documentation, that could be an issue. Or if you did not say that you would accept foreign education previously, then that would be an issue. Or if you're doing a business necessity on one of those audit triggers and you can't support the reasons that you've established in your business, or if they just don't agree with those reasons. For example, perhaps you say it's an industry standard to, require, a master's degree and 4 years of experience for what appears to be an entry-level position, and you can't show evidence from Indeed or otherwise that others are doing it, and it's a standard, an industry standard for those sorts of requirements for that type of business, then they may conclude that you have not established the business need for that situation to have exceeded the normal requirements for the job, and they may deny on that.
All right. Now,
another one, and I will say, is the recruitment efforts. not just the newspapers, let's say, but for some positions, they will get 200 applications during the recruitment period. And what you have to say, and in the when an RFI comes, they will ask not just for a summary, but they will ask for all of the CVs and resumes of all 200 applicants. And they will also ask you to prove why each and every one of those 200 people are not willing, able, and qualified to perform the job duties that are offered in the PERM. And that becomes very difficult because you must substantiate the reason that you have rejected an applicant, and it can only be based on the requirements that were legitimately written in all of the documentation. So specified in your prevailing wage, documented in your recruitment efforts, and then also written on your PERM. Anything outside of that, and I'll give you an example. I had a case once where we were in recruitment and someone applied and they rejected his application. And I said, well, why did you reject this person? Actually, upon review of the resume, has the experience, has the education, has everything, and she said, well, everyone in town knows that he is a drunkard. He's an alcoholic. And I thought, well, it was a small town. And I thought, well, now this is hard. You cannot reject based on that because we did not include in the in any of the recruitment efforts or in any of the requirements that there would be, no drinking of alcohol, that there must be drug tests. There was no morality clause. There was nothing written in there. So whether someone has a reputation for being an alcoholic, that did not establish that he was not willing, able, and qualified to do the job. He would need to have been, hired. And then if it was that he had alcohol, if that then hindered his performance to where he was not able to perform the job, then he could have been fired. But in terms of just having this sort of judgment call, you don't get to do that as an employer of during the recruitment of a PERM. It has to be specifically written in there to be a legitimate, lawful cause to reject an applicant.
All right. Now, what are requests for information in relation to the audit?
Okay, so the audits were, a part of the past. What the new situation within the flag system is to include these requests for information. So it's kind of like, the new audit type of facility, and it's a much easier system. It's much easier in terms of uploading the documentation and submitting the requests. And so that is what it is. It's a new sort of audit, let's say.
All right. Now, attorney, looking ahead, what proactive steps can employers and attorneys take to reduce the likelihood of a PERM audit?
Well, my advice is to consider what might be an automatic audit trigger from the very initiation of the case, and to build your response to the potential for an audit from the very beginning, so that you're addressing all of those issues, so that you are correctly assigning the job duties and the SOC code, so that you are including everything that's necessary in the recruitment, and so that when it comes time to file the 9089, the PERM application, that you already have prepared not only how to respond in the box to try to avoid the RFI or audit, but also to have all your documentation ready to go in the event of the audit. In this case, the offense is the best defense, and keeping your eyes open, anticipating it all will in fact avoid it. Although inevitably they can't be avoided.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those insights, attorney. It's been a truly interesting session so far. Now, for everyone watching, this discussion about PERM audits is not meant to create fear around the labor certification process, but it provides clarity about how audits work and how employers can better prepare. Now, careful documentation, compliance with recruitment requirements, and timely responses can help avoid unnecessary delays. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. ImmigrationQuestion.com is a networking platform where users can ask immigration related questions at no cost and engage and participate with participating attorneys. Now, we're also proud to share that ImmigrationQuestion.com is triple B accredited and ISO certified. This reflects our commitment to transparency, community education, accountability, and security. Attorney Giacomazzi, based on your experience, how does a platform like immigrationquestion.com help immigrants and immigration attorneys like yourself?
I think that the forum, the immigration question.com has is super helpful. I mean, that people can go on there, they can ask questions, answer questions. I think that's fantastic that it has this sort of a resource. And then if people do want to go the step forward to actually, seek advice on a particular question, or they're ready to go forward with filing that petition that they were thinking about, then you get connected with people who are experts in the field. And I think that that's really a fantastic opportunity for people to take.
Thanks, Attorney, for those thoughts. Before we move into our live Q&A, let's tackle this last question. What is one common misconception that employers or employees have about PERM audits that you believe should be clarified early on in the process?
Well, I mean, the common misconception is if there's an audit, then you've done something wrong. And that's simply not the case. We'll leave it in the way that we started it, which is that the PERM is a very special type of application. You are attesting that everything in there is all of the details regarding a lot of things, including, the qualifications of the job, the qualifications of the person, and all of the recruitment efforts that were performed. You're putting a lot of information in there, but you're not giving any supporting documentation to prove it. And it really is an honor system. And sometimes the Department of Labor just wants to check to make sure everything is there. And so receiving an RFI, receiving a PERM audit is not indicative that something has gone wrong. Similarly, there are just some answers to the question that will trigger an RFI, and going into that and knowing it, but being well prepared, again, means that it's just a normal part of this process. And the best way to, although they may not be avoidable, they can certainly be overcome with proper preparation and proper documentation.
All right. If you're just joining us, we've been speaking with attorney Mia Giacomazzi on why PERM audits happen and what you can do to avoid them. We are now moving into the live Q&A session. This is your opportunity to ask general questions and hear educational insight from a licensed immigration attorney. Please drop those questions in the chat or call us live at 516-703-3483, and we'll take as many as time permits. All right.
So the question is, can a PERM case be audited at random, even if everything was done correctly? And the answer is yes, yes, and absolutely yes. This happens. And as I explained, even if everything is absolutely done, because you aren't submitting the documentation, the reviewing or certifying officer doesn't have the ability to check the veracity of the statements or check whether everything you said is true, because you don't submit the documentation with the application. So sometimes they just want to say, okay, prove it. And you prove it, and then it's approved, and it's not an issue.
All right.
So the question is, what documents should employers keep in case of an audit? So in this case, the answer is it depends. And basically, the documentation that needs to be kept in case of an audit is all of the documents that support all of the information that you put in your PERM application. So the information that you put related to the recruitment efforts, the newspaper articles, the radio ads, the job fairs or the website posts or the job order. You must have all documentation related to that. If there's educational requirements and we say that someone has an education or a certain type of degree, then you need proof of those degrees with the diplomas or the education evaluation documentation. Similarly, if there's a requirement for a certain amount of work experience and you say that you've worked a certain period of time to establish that you have that work experience, well, then you need evidence of that. Usually you get an employer letter or a letter from your employer that confirms, yes, this person worked here from this start date to this end date. He or she worked for full-time job, a minimum of 40 hours a week, and these were the following duties that he or she did, and then you submit that evidence as well if evidence is required to establish a certain minimum of work experience. So again, all the documentation will depend on what the requirements were or what the education requirements, if there was a requirement for a certain type of driver's license or a certain type of professional license. And then all of the recruitment effort information must also be kept. And if there are one of those audit trigger things, for example, if you're saying that you need to have a language requirement, or if there's a combination, or if you are hiring for, if your minimum requirements exceed what would be normal for what the Department of Labor considers normal. Again, you have to have a documentation to prove the business necessity for those things.
Okay. All right.
Says, can social media or online job postings create issues during PERM audits? Well, sure. Well, online job postings, you will be posting job postings online as it relates to the PERM. But if you have conflicting ones, then yes, there could be an issue with the PERM. So for example, if you have a job that's posted, if you have if you have an online posting for a job that is similar to the PERM one, but the requirements are not the same, then that could cause an issue because one could say, well, why are the requirements for the PERM job different or higher than this other job that is similar to the one? Is that because you're actually narrowly tailoring this job to only make it to where only the foreign beneficiary is eligible or willing, able, and qualified for the job? Are you trying to, unlawfully exclude other potentially willing, qualified, and able U.S. applicants for this role? So yes, those could be some issues that you want to be aware of. I mean, and similarly, when you talk about recruitment, for example, you just have to be consistent. And similar with the social media. I mean, with the social media, I'm thinking, are we talking here about the social media of the beneficiary? And in that case, you want to ensure that the beneficiary's social media is consistent with the information in the PERM. And by that, I'm talking about, okay, perhaps professional social media, for example, like LinkedIn. If the foreign beneficiary has a professional profile on social media, such as LinkedIn, and has, their work experience on there with their job titles and what they're doing and where they're performing that information, it must be consistent with the information that you have provided about that person's work experience and education and information in the PERM. So job titles need to match, job duties need to match, the dates need to match, the places need to match, or, all of those things. So yeah, I mean, anything and everything could cause issues with PERM requests for information audits for sure. So this is one of the things that you want to ensure that you're consistent with. And similarly, not just online postings and social media, but the applications when you file for visas. So when you file for a visa, like a tourist visa, a student visa, an H-1B visa, any of those visas, and you file something with the Department of State called the DS-160. And in there, they ask you questions about your education and your work experience, where you work, what you did, dates and dates. If those don't match up, those dates don't match up with the PERM, it's also going to cause a problem. So again, we're looking for consistency, both on the side of the employer as well as on the side of the foreign worker.
All right. Thank you to everyone who joined this special edition webinar, and thank you, Attorney Giacomazzi, for sharing your knowledge and practical guidance with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Everyone else, you can always ask immigration questions. To visit immigrationquestion.com to ask immigration related questions, stay updated on policy updates, and register for upcoming live events. If you missed any part of today's important discussion with Attorney Giacomazzi, the replay will be available soon on Spotify. Just search Borderless Talk by immigrationquestion.com. We look forward to seeing you at our next live session on Friday. Until then, stay informed, stay prepared, and stay connected. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.